When I discovered my company had been laughing about keeping my salary frozen for 10 years while calling me too desperate to leave, I realized they had no idea who they were dealing with. What I did next didn't just get me revenge. It destroyed their entire company and landed my boss in federal prison. Oh wait, I should probably introduce myself. I'm Rebecca, and I was 35 when this happened, working at this mid-sized financial firm called Meridian Financial in downtown Seattle. For 10 years I'd been their go-to problem solver, the person who stayed late when deals were falling apart, the one who trained every new hire and fixed every mess. But apparently loyalty meant nothing to them. I was sitting in Marcus Chen's office that Tuesday morning, watching him flip through papers like my career was just another item on his to-do list. The annual review meeting I'd been dreading had finally arrived. "Rebecca, you know how much we value your contributions," he started with that fake smile plastered across his face. I'd heard this speech before. 3 times actually. Same words, same empty promises, same crushing disappointment waiting at the end. Unfortunately, with the current economic climate, we're implementing a company-wide salary freeze, Marcus continued, not even bothering to look me in the eye. But don't worry, we'll definitely revisit this next quarter. Next quarter. The same lie he told me last year and the year before that. Meanwhile, I watched him slide a folder across his desk. My performance review showing ratings of exceeds expectations in every single category. Exceeds expectations but somehow not enough for a raise. That's when something caught my attention that made my stomach drop. Sitting right there on his desk in plain view was a congratulations card for James Patterson. James, who I'd personally trained on our trading systems. James, who still called me at midnight asking how to run basic reports. James, who'd been at the company for exactly 8 months and was now celebrating his promotion to senior financial analyst, the exact position I'd been asking for since 2019. "Congratulations to James," I said, pointing at the card. Marcus had the decency to look embarrassed for about 2 seconds before launching into another speech about different career tracks and timeline considerations. But I wasn't listening anymore. I was thinking about how James earned $60,000 more than me while I did his work for him. I was thinking about how Patricia Williams in HR always found budget for male employees but somehow never for women like me. I walked back to my cubicle in a daze, passing James's corner office. Yes, office, while I still sat in a cubicle after a decade, where he was showing off his new business cards to anyone who'd listen. Senior financial analyst, he kept saying, like he'd discovered gold. The same title I'd been promised was just around the corner for 3 consecutive years. That afternoon I did something I'd never done before. I started paying attention to everything happening around me, really paying attention. I noticed how Marcus took credit for my market analysis in the team meeting. I watched Patricia approve overtime for male employees while telling women to manage their time better. I saw how the partners laughed at jokes that weren't funny when men told them, but interrupted women mid-sentence. But what I discovered that evening would expose something so much worse than simple pay discrimination. Something that would give me the power to bring their whole operation crashing down. I was working late again, because someone had to finish the Morrison Industries proposal that James had completely botched, when I heard voices coming from the executive conference room. The door was slightly open and I recognized Marcus's laugh immediately. Curious, I grabbed my coffee and walked closer, pretending to head to the break room. What I heard stopped me cold. "The beauty of Rebecca's situation," Marcus was saying to someone, "is that she's trapped. 10 years invested, scared to start over somewhere else, and frankly too comfortable to push back hard enough." My hands started shaking. They were talking about me like I was a lab rat they were studying. "Plus," came Patricia's voice, "single women in their 30s are desperate for stability. They'll accept less money if it means job security. It's basic psychology." I pressed myself against the wall, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they'd hear it. But they kept talking, completely unaware I was listening to them destroy my life. "She's saving us what, $42,000 annually compared to market rate?" That was David Morrison, one of the senior partners. "And she does the work of 2 people. Best investment we never made." They all laughed. Actually laughed about keeping me underpaid and overworked. But then Marcus said something that made my blood freeze. "The Morrison deal she's working on tonight? Once that closes, we'll have enough profit to give James another promotion. Rebecca can keep doing the heavy lifting while he takes the credit. She's too nice to complain and too scared to leave." I backed away slowly, my mind racing. Too nice to complain. Too scared to leave. They had me figured out, or so they thought. But what they didn't know was that I'd been documenting every late night, every project I'd saved, every client relationship I'd built over the past decade. Not for any particular reason, just because I liked keeping organized records. Walking back to my desk, I opened my personal laptop and started a new folder. If they thought I was trapped, they were about to learn exactly how wrong they could be. I began typing everything I'd just heard word for word with timestamps and locations. Then I started going through my files looking for patterns they probably thought I'd never notice. The Morrison Industries deal Marcus mentioned? I was the one who brought them in as a client 3 years ago. The Hartwell account that kept our department profitable? I'd saved it single-handedly when their previous advisor quit without warning. The compliance systems that prevented us from getting audited? I'd designed and implemented every single one. As I worked through the night, a picture started forming that was far worse than simple salary discrimination. Hidden in email chains and buried in financial reports, I found evidence of something that would interest more than just employment lawyers. Marcus and Patricia had been playing a much bigger game than I realized, and they'd just made the mistake of thinking I was too weak to fight back. By sunrise, I had a plan that would either get me everything I deserved or destroy my career completely. But after 10 years of being treated like furniture, I was ready to take that risk. What I discovered about their operation was bigger than my salary, bigger than promotions, and definitely big enough to bring down everyone who'd spent years laughing at my expense. The question was, how far was I willing to go to make them pay? I walked into Marcus's office the next morning with a smile that would have made him nervous if he'd been paying attention. "Thank you for being so honest about the budget situation yesterday," I said, placing a fresh cup of his favorite coffee on his desk. "I completely understand the company's position." He looked confused for a split second, probably because I'd never brought him coffee before, but then that smug grin returned to his face. "I'm glad you're being reasonable about this, Rebecca," he said, already turning back to his computer. "Teamwork makes the dream work, right?" I nodded enthusiastically, fighting the urge to pour that coffee right over his keyboard. Instead, I started phase 1 of what I was calling Operation Documentation. See, Marcus had no idea that I'd been quietly building the financial backbone of this company for 10 years. Every system they used to track client investments, I designed it. Every compliance protocol that kept us from getting shut down, I wrote the procedures. Every major client relationship that brought in millions, I was the one answering their calls at midnight when problems arose. That week, I began cataloging everything with the precision of a forensic accountant. I printed emails showing how Marcus took credit for my work. I documented every time Patricia denied my requests while approving identical requests from men. I tracked every project where I did the actual work while someone else got the recognition. But most importantly, I started noticing patterns in our financial records that made my stomach turn. The Morrison Industries account I was working on wasn't just big. It was being handled in ways that didn't match our standard procedures. Fees were being split differently than what was documented in client agreements. Investment returns were being reported in ways that seemed designed to confuse rather than clarify. And Marcus's signature was on approvals that should have required board oversight. I spent my lunch breaks at the downtown library, researching financial regulations and whistleblower protections. I learned about something called the False Claims Act, which protects employees who report fraud against government entities. Meridian Financial managed several state pension funds. If they were manipulating those accounts, it wasn't just theft, it was federal crime. By Friday, I had enough evidence to fill 3 banker boxes, but I needed something more concrete. That's when opportunity knocked in the most unexpected way. James burst into my cubicle looking panicked. "Rebecca, I need your help," he whispered. "Marcus asked me to review the Morrison quarterly reports, but the numbers aren't adding up. Something's wrong with the fee calculations." I looked at his computer screen and felt my heart skip a beat. There it was, right in front of me, proof that they were overcharging clients and pocketing the difference. "These look fine to me," I said calmly, taking screenshots with my phone while pretending to scroll through the data. "Maybe you should ask Marcus to explain them to you." James nodded gratefully, completely unaware that he'd just handed me the smoking gun I needed. As he walked away, I realized that my plan was about to expand beyond getting fair treatment. What I'd discovered was bigger than salary discrimination, bigger than workplace harassment, and definitely big enough to destroy everyone who'd spent years treating me like I was invisible. But I needed professional help to do this right. That weekend I made a phone call that would turn my quiet revenge into something they'd never recover from. Monday morning started with me sitting across from Sarah Mitchell, the employment attorney my college roommate had recommended. Sarah's office overlooked Elliott Bay, and I remember thinking how different my life might look a few months from now as I handed her my carefully organized evidence boxes. "Rebecca," she said after reviewing just the first folder, "this isn't just employment discrimination. What you've documented here suggests systematic financial fraud." She pulled out a legal pad and started taking notes. "These fee discrepancies alone could trigger a federal investigation. Have you contacted the Securities and Exchange Commission?" I shook my head, feeling suddenly overwhelmed. "I just wanted them to pay me fairly," I admitted. "I never intended to become some kind of whistleblower." Sarah leaned forward, her expression serious. "Sometimes the universe puts you exactly where you need to be to stop something terrible. These pension fund irregularities you found? That's retirement money being stolen from teachers and firefighters." She explained the whistleblower process, including something that made my eyes widen: financial rewards for reporting securities fraud. "If the government recovers money based on your evidence, you could receive 10 to 30% of the total," she said. "We're potentially talking about millions of dollars, Rebecca." Walking back to the office, my mind was spinning. I'd gone from wanting a raise to potentially becoming a millionaire while taking down the people who'd made my life miserable. But first, I needed more evidence, and I had to be incredibly careful about how I obtained it. That afternoon, Marcus called an all-hands meeting to announce his promotion to regional director. Standing there in front of the entire staff, talking about exciting growth opportunities and team success, he looked like exactly what he was: a fraud in an expensive suit. I applauded with everyone else, but inside I was calculating exactly how many federal crimes he'd just inadvertently confessed to. After the meeting, Patricia cornered me by the elevators. "Rebecca, I hope you understand that Marcus's promotion creates new opportunities for advancement," she said with that fake concern she'd perfected over the years. "Of course, we'll need to see continued dedication and team spirit from everyone." "Absolutely," I replied, smiling sweetly. "I'm completely committed to doing what's right for this company." She nodded approvingly, having no idea that what was right for the company meant exposing every illegal thing they'd been doing. That evening I worked late again, but this time it wasn't to fix someone else's mistakes. I was copying files that would end careers. Financial records showing systematic overcharging. Email chains proving they knew about the illegal fee structures. Board meeting minutes that demonstrated willful ignorance of federal regulations. Every piece of evidence Sarah had told me to find. The breakthrough came when I accessed Marcus's shared drive folder. The same one where he'd carelessly left it unlocked months ago. Hidden in subfolder after subfolder, I found the real accounting records. The ones that showed exactly how much money they'd been stealing and where it had gone. Offshore accounts. Personal investments. Even a boat purchase that Marcus had somehow classified as a client entertainment expense. But the most damning evidence was a recorded phone call Marcus had apparently saved by accident. Him and David Morrison discussing how to restructure the pension fund allocations to hide their theft. 17 minutes of two men casually planning to steal millions from public employees' retirement funds. I sat in my cubicle at 11 p.m., staring at files that would send people to federal prison, and realized I'd reached a point of no return. Tomorrow I would either destroy my entire career or destroy theirs. There was no middle ground anymore. The funny thing was, I wasn't scared. For the first time in 10 years I felt powerful. They'd spent so long treating me like I was invisible that they'd forgotten I could see everything they were doing. Every illegal transaction, every fraudulent report, every stolen dollar. I had it all documented with timestamps and digital signatures. Marcus had been right about one thing during that overheard conversation. I was too nice to complain about small things like salary discrimination. But stealing millions from teachers' retirement funds? That wasn't small, and I wasn't going to stay quiet about it. Sarah had scheduled a meeting with federal investigators for Thursday morning. In 3 days I would walk into the FBI field office with enough evidence to launch the biggest financial fraud investigation Seattle had seen in years. Marcus, Patricia, and David had no idea that their calm, reasonable, invisible employee was about to become their worst nightmare. The only question left was whether I should give them any warning at all. or just let them find out when the handcuffs clicked shut. Thursday morning, I walked into the FBI field office carrying a single briefcase that would destroy everything Marcus had built. Agent Jennifer Walsh, a sharp woman in her 40s, led me into a sterile conference room where 2 other agents were waiting. "Ms. Thompson," she said, "we've reviewed the preliminary evidence your attorney provided. What you've uncovered appears to be significantly larger than initially reported." I opened my briefcase and laid out printed emails, financial records, and USB drives containing the recorded phone calls. "This goes back at least 5 years," I explained, watching their expressions grow more serious with each document. "They've been systematically overcharging government pension funds and hiding the excess in offshore accounts." Agent Walsh picked up the recorded conversation between Marcus and David Morrison, her eyebrows rising as she read the transcript. "Ms. Thompson, you understand that once we begin this investigation, there's no going back," another agent warned. "These people will know exactly who provided this evidence." I nodded calmly. "I've been invisible to them for 10 years. It's time they finally saw me." The meeting lasted 4 hours. They explained the whistleblower process, the timeline for investigation, and the protection measures they'd put in place. Most importantly, they confirmed what Sarah had told me about financial compensation. "If we recover the stolen funds, you're looking at somewhere between $8 and $15 million in rewards," Agent Walsh said matter-of-factly. I left the FBI office feeling like I was floating. $8 to $15 million. More money than I'd ever dreamed of having. But the real satisfaction would come from watching Marcus's face when he realized his invisible employee had brought down his entire operation. That afternoon, I returned to Meridian Financial and did something I'd never done before. I started saying no. When James asked me to fix his Morrison Industries presentation, I told him I was too busy. When Patricia tried to dump extra compliance work on my desk, I politely declined, citing other priorities. When Marcus demanded I stay late to prepare reports for his Monday meeting, I smiled and said, "I have plans." Their confusion was immediate and obvious. Marcus called me into his office Friday afternoon, his fake smile more strained than usual. "Rebecca, I'm concerned about your recent attitude," he said, leaning back in his leather chair. "Team players don't suddenly start refusing assignments." "I'm not refusing anything," I replied calmly. "I'm just prioritizing my workload more effectively. Isn't that what you've been telling women to do for years?" His face darkened, but before he could respond, his phone rang. It was David Morrison, and I could hear the panic in his voice even from across the desk. "Marcus, we have a problem," David's voice crackled through the speakerphone. "The state pension fund is asking for a complete audit of their account. They want to see every fee structure and transaction going back 5 years." I watched the color drain from Marcus's face as he fumbled to end the call. "Is everything all right?" I asked innocently. "You look stressed." Marcus forced another fake smile, but his hands were shaking slightly. "Just normal business complications," he said. "Nothing that can't be handled with proper teamwork." I nodded sympathetically and left his office, knowing that by Monday morning his world would start collapsing. The FBI had warned me that initial investigation steps would begin immediately, starting with formal requests for financial records that would put every criminal on high alert. That weekend I did something I hadn't done in years. I relaxed. I went shopping, bought myself expensive wine, and started looking at real estate listings for houses I could actually afford. Not because I needed them now, but because soon I'd have enough money to buy whatever I wanted. Monday morning brought exactly the chaos I'd expected. Patricia was running around like a chicken with its head cut off, demanding that everyone organize their files immediately for an unexpected audit. Marcus was locked in his office with the company's lawyers, their voices rising with each passing hour. But the real fireworks started when Agent Walsh arrived with a federal search warrant. I was sitting at my desk, calmly typing up quarterly reports, when 2 FBI agents walked through our lobby doors. The entire office went silent, watching as they approached the reception desk and announced they were there to execute a federal warrant for financial records. Marcus emerged from his office looking like he'd seen a ghost. "What's this about?" he demanded, trying to maintain his usual arrogant tone. Agent Walsh handed him the warrant and explained they were investigating potential securities fraud and misappropriation of government funds. "This is ridiculous," Marcus sputtered. "We run a completely legitimate operation here." Someone obviously gave you false information. Agent Walsh looked at him with the kind of calm professionalism I'd always wished I could master. Sir, we'll need access to all financial records, email servers, and personal computers immediately. As federal agents began boxing up computers and filing cabinets, I continued working at my desk like nothing unusual was happening. Patricia rushed over to me, her usual composure completely gone. Rebecca, do you know anything about this? She whispered frantically. Did you hear anything? See anything suspicious? I looked up from my computer with genuine surprise. Suspicious about what? I asked. I just do my job and mind my own business. Maybe you should ask the people who actually make the important decisions around here. She stared at me for a long moment, something flickering in her eyes that might have been recognition, but then Marcus called her name from across the office. By Wednesday, the entire executive team was under investigation. James had been fired after they discovered he'd been signing documents he didn't understand. David Morrison had hired 3 different lawyers. And Marcus? Marcus was about to learn exactly what it felt like to be powerless. 2 weeks after the FBI raid, I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop when my phone rang. It was Marcus, calling from what sounded like a payphone based on the background noise. Rebecca. His voice was different now, desperate, stripped of its usual arrogance. We need to talk. I know it was you. I'm sorry, what was me? I asked, genuinely curious about what he'd figured out. There was a long pause before he spoke again. The investigation. The evidence they have. You're the only one who could have accessed those files. I took a sip of my latte, enjoying this conversation more than I probably should have. Marcus, I'm not sure what you're suggesting, I said calmly. Are you accusing me of something? Another pause, then the sound of him taking a shaky breath. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm asking for help. They're going to arrest me, Rebecca. My lawyer says the evidence is overwhelming. That's when I decided to stop pretending. You mean the evidence of you stealing millions from teachers' retirement funds? I asked. Or the evidence of you systematically underpaying female employees while giving promotions to unqualified men? Which evidence are you worried about, Marcus? The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Finally he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. What do you want? Money? A recommendation letter? I can make this worth your while if you just tell them you made a mistake. I laughed, actually laughed out loud. Marcus, you still don't get it, do you? This isn't about what I want anymore. This is about what you deserve. I hung up before he could respond, feeling lighter than I had in years. The next morning, I watched from my apartment window as news vans surrounded the Meridian Financial building. The story had broken nationwide. Seattle financial firm executives arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. Marcus's photo was on every news website, not as a successful regional director, but as a federal criminal. Agent Walsh called me that afternoon with updates I'd been waiting to hear. Marcus Chin has been charged with 15 counts of securities fraud and embezzlement, she said. Patricia Williams is facing charges for conspiracy and obstruction of justice. David Morrison is cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. What about the financial recovery? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The preliminary calculations show approximately $23 million in recoverable funds, she replied. Based on your whistleblower agreement, you're looking at compensation in the range of $12 to $15 million. $15 million. I sat down hard in my kitchen chair, trying to process numbers that large. More money than my father had made in his entire career. More money than I'd ever thought possible. But the real satisfaction came from knowing that every teacher, firefighter, and public employee who'd been robbed would get their retirement money back. 3 months later, I received a call that made everything feel complete. It was Jennifer Patterson, James's replacement at what remained of Meridian Financial. Rebecca, she said nervously, I know this might be awkward, but we're wondering if you'd consider returning to help us rebuild. We're prepared to offer you the position of Chief Financial Officer with a salary of $250,000 annually. I almost choked on my coffee. Chief Financial Officer. The position that would have taken me 20 years to reach under their old system. I appreciate the offer, I said, echoing words I'd used before, but I've started my own consulting firm. Thompson Financial Advisory is doing quite well. And it was. Using my whistleblower compensation, I'd started a company focused on helping small businesses manage their finances ethically. I'd hired 5 employees, all women who'd been overlooked or underpaid at their previous jobs. We specialized in working with nonprofits and government agencies, using the same attention to detail that had exposed Marcus's crimes to help honest organizations succeed. 6 months after that, I got one final call from my old life. It was James calling from a customer service job at a local bank. "Rebecca, I wanted to apologize," he said, his voice humble in a way I'd never heard before. "I know I didn't deserve those promotions. I know you did all the work while I took credit. I'm sorry." I accepted his apology because holding grudges isn't healthy, but I also made sure he understood something important. "James, the problem wasn't that you got promoted," I told him. "The problem was that they created a system where merit didn't matter. You were just a symptom of a much bigger disease." Today, Thompson Financial Advisory manages over $200 million in client assets. We've helped dozens of nonprofits optimize their operations and assisted 3 government agencies in implementing new fraud prevention systems. My team of 12 employees, still all women, knows exactly what they're worth because I make sure they're paid fairly from day one. Marcus is serving 8 years in federal prison. Patricia lost her professional licenses and works at a call center. David Morrison cooperated with prosecutors but still received 3 years for his role in the fraud. Their entire operation collapsed within 6 months of my walking into that FBI office. But the real victory isn't their punishment or my financial success. The real victory is that I finally understand my own value, and I built a company that proves it every single day. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies, it's becoming so successful that they become irrelevant. If you're sitting in a cubicle right now being overlooked and underpaid, remember this: your value doesn't decrease because someone refuses to see it. Document everything, know your worth, and never be afraid to walk away from people who treat you like you're invisible. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop asking for respect and start demanding it.